Yeah, sounds good. Let's take it away.
All right. Okay, so good morning, everybody, wherever you are joining from, India or other parts of Southeast Asia. So, welcome once again. This is going to be a very great immersive session for all of you, hopefully. And I'm sure you are all well versed with the topic that we're going to be talking about today, which is about how do we make the most of the Amazon FSx service. And we're going to actually take you through a hands-on demo, which is why this is so special. And we've kept 2 hours for the entire session. Anirudh, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, before we start I'd love to take you through the agenda and the details of how these 120 minutes we plan to use with all of you. But before that, I'm going to take a couple of minutes just to introduce myself and also Aspire Next, which is an AWS Advanced Consulting partner. So before that, my name is Bhavika Thakkar, and I lead sales and strategic alliances for Aspire Next, based out of Singapore. We have been an AWS partner for a fairly long time, and we've been able to jointly help a lot of customers get on to their cloud journey. With different services that AWS offers, which one of them we are going to be talking today. Also, Aspire Next, just to give you a quick introduction, is present in various different countries. We are headquartered in Singapore, and we do have operations offices in Malaysia, India, and also an entity in the US. We do a lot of work largely on cloud. We've helped several customers to actually embark on their cloud journey, which is now, I don't think, an option. It's not about, like I say, it's not about when clients will get onto the cloud. It's not about if they will get on the cloud. It's about when, because each one of us have a mandate to drive our digital roadmap for our respective organizations. So we would love to also talk to you a little more about what we do, because we do help customers in doing serverless architectures. We help customers do a DC exit plan. We also have a very strong practice on big data analytics, AI, ML, robotics, chatbots, the entire suite, including IoT. And we also do a lot of work around application development, modernization, and security, largely on cybersecurity. So while I've used a lot of things to describe what we do, I do want to leave this on the table, because if any of you have any queries or interest in any of these areas, we would love to get a note from you and help you. But coming back to the main discussion for today, we are going to start in another 5 minutes once I hand over and introduce our lovely speakers this morning. We've actually broken down this workshop, the hands-on, into 2 parts. Anirudh, you can stay on the earlier slide, please. We've actually broken this into 2 parts. One is because it's a hands-on workshop, there are a few quick checkpoints that we want to go through each one of you. So we will tell you what you need to have, which is something that pretty much most of you will have: a laptop and the internet connectivity, etc. If you want to do a hands-on and work on your own remote computers. We will then have a presentation, which is going to be not a hands-on one, but where Lily is going to talk about how this service has been deployed and used by other customers in other parts of the world. So we will talk about the service itself and a little bit about the use cases, which may probably throw some ideas for you on how you could also potentially leverage this service. We will then go back to the main part 2 of the workshop, as we'd like to call it, and then we would like to close with some exciting offers that you can avail. Q&A, while we've said it's at the end, but this is a long session, and then we'd love to have it interactive. You can either put your question on the chat window, And if you want to kind of make a quick point and you want to talk about it, please feel free to make a request and we can make sure we pause for you to ask the question in person. So both options are open. Anirudh, next slide, please. Excellent. So now I'm going to, very kindly invite the two great speakers we have who are both very technical in nature. Definitely Mark. Mark is a part of the Aspire Next team, which is also what I represent. And he has helped several customers in Southeast Asia to embark not only on the cloud journey, but he's had a very great approach on understanding the actual issue or business challenge that you're having or any organization has, and then supports them in choosing the right solution architecture framework. So Mark is going to lead the first part, which is on the workshop. He's going to be being pretty much your partner in crime in some sense. And then we have Lily. Lily is from AWS and she has taken time to personally be here to guide each one of us on how best we can leverage the FSX service. And she, as you can see, works across ASEAN and APJ. And she has obviously a lot of hands-on experience on this particular service. So feel free to leverage her presence and ask her questions. So that's our two speakers for the day. And with that, I'm going to invite Mark yourself to take over and go through the prerequisites. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bhavika. Thanks for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on which region you're from. So I'm going to take you through a few prerequisites to the workshop, like deploying the VPC required to deploy FSX file servers, deploying the directory services required to deploy your FSX file servers. So I'm just going to share my screen and give you a quick introduction to what we're going to be deploying today. Right, so just let me know if you guys can see my screen. If you guys can't see my screen, might have to, let's see what's the issue there. Just drop a
I can see
message.
the chime now from your screen.
All right, so you guys can see my screen, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is basically what we're going to be deploying today, right? So what we have is within our AWS region, we're going to be creating a VPC that spans two availability zones. We're going to create a public subnet in each availability zone, a Windows instance in our public subnet, and in our private subnet, we're going to be deploying our multi-AZ FSX file server and our Microsoft Active Directory that is used for authentication by both the Windows server and our FSX file server. And along with the FSX file server, I'm going to show you the metrics that are available on CloudWatch as a dashboard, right? So if everyone would log in to your AWS console now, or if you guys do not have your console access, you guys can follow me by just looking at my screen, right? So what I'm going to do is I've already logged into my AWS management console. This is the console you typically get when you log into your management console. And I'm going to be doing my deployment in North Virginia, right? So the first thing I'm going to be deploying, and you guys are welcome to follow along, it would be my VPC, right? So I'm going to take you step by step into deploying your VPC and deploying the directory service. It's going to make it easier, I think, for everyone to understand if I do this with a diagram, right? So I'm going to go ahead. So this is my AWS cloud, and within my AWS cloud, I'm going to go ahead and deploy my VPC. Right, so switching back to my management console, I'm going to go ahead and deploy the VPC. We just move this to the side. Right, so there's two ways you can deploy VPC. You can go ahead with the launch VPC wizard, where you can just go ahead and click on VPC with public and private subnets, click on select and go through the workflow, or you can manually do it. And I think it's important that everyone learns how to manually do it, because it really helps you realize exactly what you're creating when you're deploying your VPC. So I'm going to call this FSX demo. So I use a default CIDR block that is the 10.0.0.0/16 CIDR block, right? You can go ahead and choose IPv6 CIDR blocks if your company does use IPv6 also within the organization, and if you plan on using a VPN tunnel or direct connect to connect to your FSX file storage, right? Right. So I've successfully deployed my VPC. What's next is within my VPC, I need to deploy subnets across availability zones. So I have private and a public subnet across two availability zones. So this is my AZ1. This is my AZ2. Right. So I'm going to be deploying two public subnets and two private subnets. Right. So I've created my complete network. That's my VPC. So on premise, you would be more familiar with VLANs. And I'm going to go ahead and create my subnet. Please let me know in the messages if you have any doubts as to what's happening uh, throughout the workshop. Right, so like, I'm going to be using US East 1A and US East 1B as my AZs for this deployment. Right, so what I'm doing right now with the IPv4 CIDR block for my subnet is I'm splitting my VPC CIDR block into virtual networks, right? So within my LAN and within my virtual local area network, I'm splitting it into smaller networks for various subnets. So it's very similar to what you would do on premise for your VLANs. That's my first subnet. I'm going to go ahead and put this in my second availability zone. I'm going to start creating my private subnets. So the difference between a private subnet and a public subnet is how external users actually access resources within those subnets. Now, a public subnet is basically you're putting your resources on the internet, so it is directly accessible from the internet through public endpoints or public IPs. Now, resources that sit in your private subnet, on the other hand, are not directly accessible from the internet, although they do have the ability to communicate with the internet from with outbound connections, right? So how we achieve that is through something called NAT gateway, which I would be also deploying on this workshop. And create my private subnet for second availability zone. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves too and just ask me. Right, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've created my four subnets, right? So let me just filter it based on my VPC. Right. So I've created my 4 subnets, and now what I'm going to go ahead and do is actually going to go ahead and route my subnets, right? So how you would typically create your routing tables on premise, you're going to do the same for your subnets on the cloud, right? Now, the one thing you do need, though, as if you see the original diagram, is something called an internet gateway. Now, the internet gateway is responsible for all the internet connections you have in your whole network, right? So any outbound internet connections actually go through the internet gateway. And if you have to RDP into your Windows instance, you need to make sure that your Windows instance is available on the internet for you to RDP, and that is done through the internet gateway. So I'm going to go ahead and create an internet gateway. So I'm calling this the FSX demo IGW, right? So if you see, as soon as you create it, the state of the internet gateway is detached, right? So this is a very important step that you don't forget to attach your internet gateway to your VPC, because a lot of people forget to attach the internet gateway, and it becomes a lot of troubleshooting to go backwards to see where you've missed out on this, right? So I'm going to go ahead to my route tables. There would be a route table that was already created for my VPC when I created my VPC, as you can see. So I'm going to go into routes. I'm going to edit my routes, and I'm going to add my route to the internet. So that's 0.0.0/0. And then you just search for internet gateway. Right? You click on internet gateway, and the internet gateway ID pops up. Click on the ID and click on save routes. Is everyone following any questions at the moment? Right, that doesn't look like there are any questions for me. After creating my routes, I'm going to go ahead and associate my subnets to this particular route table. So as you can see that the route table is bound to the VPC I am using. So my subnets already populate. So I'm going to go ahead and associate my route tables to this particular route table. My subnets is particular route table, right? So that's basically me creating the skeleton of our infrastructure, right? So what I've done is I've created our public subnets, I've created our private subnets, I've created our internet gateway, right? I've created them within 2 availability zones so that both availability zones have internet access, and my infrastructure is now resilient to an availability zone failure. So in case my AZ1 goes down, I still have my infrastructure running in AZ2, that's making it resilient to any failures. Right. So what we're going to go ahead and deploy next is our directory services. Now, the directory services is basically going to be under Microsoft Manage AD. So what happens is AWS creates your Microsoft AD in the backend with 2 domain controllers that span 2 availability zones, etc. And all you have to do is worry about managing your AD while AWS manages the infrastructure that hosts your AD. Right. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on Setup Directory, and these are the options you have, right? So you have the AWS Managed Microsoft AD, like I was saying, where AWS deploys your Microsoft AD, and you get to manage the AD while AWS manages the infrastructure and the software patches required to run your Active Directory. Then you have your simple AD, that's your simple Active Directory service. So that runs on AWS, to AWS, and you can use it within multiple applications and stuff. And you have your AD connector. So in case you need to connect your Active Directory that's sitting on other resources into AWS for your applications to authenticate or to peer to different Active Directories, you can use the AD connector. And your last type of authentication available is something called Amazon Cognito Useful. So this is an authentication service that's native to Amazon again, that uses a service called Cognito, where you can integrate various services like an AD to authenticate with Cognito, so that applications that use Cognito for authentication can also authenticate with your AD in the backend. We're going to go ahead and click on AWS Manage Microsoft AD. And so you have two types. You have your enterprise edition and your standard edition. We're going to go for the standard edition for this demo, but depending on your use case, right? So if you use standard edition when you're a small to medium SMB business, or if you're a really large client, you would be using the enterprise edition. And the billing is also dependent on the edition you use. So I'm going to go ahead and call my DNS name aspire.local. You guys can go ahead and use your names. So it can be mark.local or something like that. And then just that makes it easier for you to remember, right? So because you're gonna have to remember the details you put here. So I'm gonna call this Aspire. That's going to be my NetBIOS name. So a directory description, right? Right. So, given a password, so just remember the password has to be 8 to 64 characters and cannot contain the word admin in it, right? So it is a complex password, so it has to be something that has both special cases, low cases, upper cases, and numericals. Any questions to here? I don't think there are any questions at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and this is where you would choose where you want to deploy it, right? So what I've gone and done is I'm going to go ahead and deploy it in my VPC that I just created, and I get to choose my subnet. So I'm going to deploy this in private subnet 1A and private subnet 1B, right? After that, I'm going to click on next. And this is just a review to all the settings that you've done previously. So just if you guys have it open, go ahead and open a sticky note. And so like you see, so I'm going to go ahead and say my directory services. That's aspire.local, and my NetBIOS name is aspire. Right. So once you're done with that, go ahead and click create directory. The create directory does take some time. It'll take you about 20 to 45 minutes to create. So while our directory is being created, I'm going to actually hand over the session to Lily to take you through FSX as a service and give you examples and use cases as to how various customers use FSX for different use cases. Right. So Lily, over to you. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Anirudh. Awesome. Before I begin, do we have any questions so far for the initial setup for your hands-on experience? Just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page until the VPC setups and AD. Do we have any questions so far? No? All right. If you have anything to troubleshoot, please don't be shy. I think one of the really valuable experiences you can get from today is having that step-by-step guidance from Aspire Next. So please, if you have any questions, put it on the chat. For the next maybe 30 minutes or so, let's look into why we are going through this hands-on lab. I think the how is important as well as the why. So I believe a lot of you are from not only a technical background, but also the business decision makers or from the BD or sales aspect. So as business professionals, I think what's important is to be able to translate the value of using a cloud native, fully managed file server for your business. How does that resonate to you and your future business? So regards to that, I'd like to just kick off the session with saying, well, files are actually everywhere. So oftentimes we think that file storage or file servers are purely talking about on-prem NAS solutions, the EMCs, the NetApps, the VMs, so on and so forth. But file data actually is pretty much everywhere when it comes to user shares, home directories. We use it for archiving and backups, for content repositories, so on and so forth. So where we want to really tackle for your business is when it comes to these kind of challenges. This is a very typical on-prem challenge that we see from customers as well. So when we dive into specifically on storage, what I want to focus on is the scalability and also the utilization. So what that means is that there was a recent report from IDC that was looking into the pure size of storage that is expected to be installed by 2025. Any guess how much that would be? The pure size of storage that will be installed by 2025 in this industry. And that number is 13 zettabytes. Zettabytes. That's an awfully large size. But at the same time, if we look into how much storage is actually going to use for storing, that's 7.5 zettabytes. What that means is that around 60% of the storage that customers purchase and all the businesses purchase is going to be underutilized. Another very interesting fact is that IDC noted that although the amount of storage capacity is going to grow about 300% across the next 7 years, the IT budget is not going to resonate that growth. It's most likely going to be flat. That's a reality. So here comes the challenges when it comes to that growing infrastructure cost and your scalability. Probably especially for companies that's working through analytics and better predictions and customizations and machine learning for customers, you are seeing the growth in data, while the IT budget is pretty much going to be stringent. So we have all this dilemmas of how we're going to handle the storage and the compute capacity, as well as the IT budget, and also the ongoing overhead admin that you have to invest. So those are the key challenges that we see from customers when they're looking after the entire hardware by themselves. So that's where cloud native storage fits in. And this is a brief diagram about the portfolio of AWS storage services. If you look into the rehost aspect, that's where we talk about a simple lift and shift. So we look into your architecture in the on-prem world, and then we see how we can be less disruptive with the architecture and move that to AWS. And this is commonly seen when it's the first cloud journey to the for data migration and storage migration. And in this case, typically we see something like, for example, SQL Server migration. You install that on Amazon EC2, attach block storage, which is Amazon EBS, so on and so forth. If you want to really remove that overhead admin and increase that scalability that was just mentioned from the previous slide, what we typically see is customers going through re-platform. And the re-platform means that you leverage fully managed database or storage services. And one of the examples is Amazon FSx, which is what we are going through today. So FSx has two types, and you'll see this when you are installing it from your own management console. You'll have these two options. One is Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, and this is where we are going to dive in a little bit deeper today, because there are a lot of use cases that would be relevant to you at this moment. Amazon FSx for Lustre is more compatible when it comes to high performance computing. So, for example, research institutes, video processing, media companies are highly using this for high performing file storage. But again, today, the spotlight goes to Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. What it actually means and what it does, if I were to explain that in one single sentence, is that it's a fully managed file server that is compatible to Windows. So it's a file storage service that actually runs on Windows Server. What that means is that it has 100% compatibility to Windows. And in fact, if you look into the cloud native file storage market, there is no other service that has 100% compatibility to Windows. Even if you look into the major cloud vendors, FSx is the only cloud native file storage service that is fully compatible to Windows. Hence, you can leverage the features that you're already used to, and also the Windows-based applications that needs file shared storage to have to utilize 100% of their potential. Let's dive in a little bit about what it actually means to have a fully managed service. So sometimes if you're having file servers, you could be leveraging Amazon EC2 on AWS. But that doesn't mean that you have a fully managed experience. A fully managed experience means that not only does AWS take care of the hardware that you look into on the left side, but also when it comes to configuring the file systems, applying Windows updates, taking care of the software licensing, the backups, and also integration to the other AWS security tools so that it helps you with the monitoring as well. So let's dive a little bit deeper on its service features. This is a very condensed form of all the different features available from Amazon FSx for Windows File Server. I have a few more slides that explains a little bit in a deeper aspect, but I want to go through some of the highlights during this slide. So the first thing is protocol and OS support, as well as the compatibility in other ways. So if you look over here, Amazon FSx pretty much supports SMB 2.0 all the way to 3.1.1. If you're currently considering a cloud-native file storage service and you're using SMB that is before 3.0, not a lot of the services will be even available. So if you want that full SMB protocol support, FSx is a really intriguing service for you that really gives you that kind of flexibility. And also, if you want to access from Windows or Linux or Mac, so on and so forth. In terms of accessibility, and I'm going through the content in terms of the verticals. If you look into the compute instance accessibility, what we're seeing a lot these days is from end user computing customers. A lot of the times, if you want to have that virtual desktop environment across hundreds or even thousands of employees and give them low latency, while having that concurrent access to the same shared file storage, FSx has been a pretty popular option for these customers. Not only that, we also see a lot of integration with containers. So in AWS, we have something called ECS and also EKS for Kubernetes. And we also see a lot of integration when it comes to VMware Cloud on AWS as well. Now, in terms of performance, I'll go to the second column. Again, Amazon FSx is actually running on Windows servers. It's not a secret. We're pretty open about it. And what that brings is that each file share will be available to have 64 terabytes. But the good thing about FSx is that because of its compatibility, it can scale to petabytes if you were to have that kind of storage requirement using DFS namespaces. And this applies when it comes to the throughputs as well. So here you can see that it's talking about millions of IOP scalability, and that is exactly because you can use DFS namespaces and scale the throughput to not just thousands, but also millions. There's also no limit of the number of file shares that you want to use, you want to spin up. And that really brings that freedom for customers to have the performance or scalability that they want, whether it's about the throughput or also the storage size. Now, if we look into the availability and security as a whole, first of all, Amazon FSx provides daily automated backups, and that's stored into Amazon S3. For those who are unfamiliar with S3, it's an object storage service which has 11 nines of durability. So what that means is that if you store 1,000 objects into S3, the possibility that you might lose an object, it will take 1,000,000 years. So that's how durable it is to have backups into Amazon S3, and that being done every day, as well as you can always configure and customize your own scheduled backups as well. This brings a lot of this removes a lot of the blockers when it comes to durability and security for customers. You can also enable multi-AZ deployment, which helps synchronous replication, not only within the availability zone, but also across the availability zones. Now, in terms of cost optimization, I won't go through it too much because we actually have an entire segment talking about TCO and cost optimization. But I just want to highlight that as a customer, as an end user, if you go to the AWS Management Console, you can see how easy it is to choose between the SSD and HDD option. You'll also have the single AZ and multi-AZ option. And then this is a relatively new feature that we've released, but you can also have the storage and throughput scalability automated. So to go through a little bit deeper on each and every segment, one again is about the availability and durability. Here, I just want to highlight that the concept of availability zone in AWS is not a single data center. So when we say it's available for a single AZ, it means actually the data will be synchronously replicated within multiple data centers. For AWS, an AZ equals a cluster of data centers. So when we say single AZ, it's actually replicating across multiple data centers already. And then when it's a multi-AZ option, you will have two clusters of data centers having a synchronous replication for your backup. And also in terms of performance, so again, we have two different storage options. One is SSD, the other one being HDD. When you go for SSD, you will have sub-millisecond latency. And if it's a single-digit millisecond latency that you need, you can easily go with the HDD option. Also, today, if you go to the Management Console and go to Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, when you put in the storage capacity that you need, AWS will recommend the throughput capacity that is suitable for that. But obviously, you can choose across these different options as well. And lastly, in terms of security, the data will be encrypted in transit and at rest. Also, when it comes to compliance, AWS is compliant with SOC, PCI, or HIPAA, so on and so forth. You can actually download all the compliance reports if you'd like, from a service called AWS Artifact. You can check out from the Management Console. The other aspect about using cloud native file storage is that you can integrate it with other monitoring or security tools. So if you'd like to look into the performance or set up particular alarms, you can use CloudWatch. For audit reasons, you can use something called CloudTrail as well. So now let's look into the TCO and pricing, and then I'll just pause that to get to know if there are any questions. Now, TCO is a very, very, very common question we hear from our customers. And I think what is very important to help enable is understanding the true TCO the customers are paying for their on-prem environment, as well as understanding what is involved in a fully managed service. So what you see over here is a scenario if we are purchasing 1 petabyte of raw storage from on-prem. After RAIDs and formatting, so on and so forth, typically that storage that is actually usable would shrink to 800 or even less. And as you've heard from the very beginning of this session where I talked about the IDC report, about 60% of the storage is underutilized. So if you look into the comparison, a lot of the times our customers will come to us and say, hey, I'm using 1 petabyte of storage on-prem. That's how much I will need in the cloud. Typically, when we do that analysis of how much is actually being utilized, this is only 40 to 50%. So the actual cost comparison will be about 400 or 500 terabytes in this scenario. And then comes understanding the entire cost that the customer is paying for that on-prem environment. Very typically, when you purchase on-prem NAS, for example, you would consider the direct storage being the actual cost that you're paying. But this is not usually the case. If you look into all the things on the left side, when it comes to the underutilized storage expense, as well as the human resources, the software maintenance, the patching, the networking, and also the disaster recovery and backups, and not to mention the data centers, the power and cooling, so on and so forth, which are most of the times it's not even accurately tracked. That is the actual amount that you are paying for the on-prem environment. So if you were to compare that to cloud, the cloud environment will include something around the migrations and the cloud networking, data egress, and the managed backup, so on and so forth, which the true TCO comparison will be this on the left side, on the very left side versus the right, as you can see, as opposed to what we are thinking typically about the direct storage you pay for versus AWS. So if we look into the pricing, and this is a pricing based on the Singapore region. Again, we have the single AZ and multi-AZ option. We have SSD and HDD. What is really interesting about FSX is that with the HDD option, it goes as low as 3 cents per gigabyte per month, even if you're having multi-AZ. So consider that as having synchronous replication across 2 or more data centers per AZ. So that means quite a lot of data centers already for synchronous replication. For those who are looking for Mumbai region, and I think this is another interesting point, is actually lower than the Singapore region. So typically you will see about 2.3 cents per gigabyte per month instead of 3 cents. Now, with this pricing point, actually FSX has become the lowest cost file storage service in the cloud. So again, it is already the only fully Windows compatible file storage service, but at the same time, it has become the lowest cost of file storage in the cloud available, thanks to the HDD option. If you do the calculation, you'll actually see that it's about 10% of the cost versus SSD. Now, another interesting thing about FSX is that it supports data deduplication. So typically what we see is a lot of the cases, the customer storage will actually have 30 to 60% of their storage going through data dedupe. So that is what they will save in terms of cost. So if we look into an example TCO, let's say, and this is again a Singapore-based estimate, let's say a customer is looking for 10 terabytes of storage, and we've gone through the data deduplication and we realized only 50% of the storage is actually needed to move. Once that's done, we understand if the customer wants to use multi-AZ or a single AZ, SSD, and HDD option. In this case, we're going to look into multi-AZ and HDD. The throughput requirement, again, is recommended from AWS as long as you put that storage size, but you can also customize. And typically, we would look into 1x of backup requirement. So if we put everything together, again, the pricing is per gigabyte per month. So that means you can simply do that calculation through the previous slide that you've seen. And without backups, it's going to be about $230 per month. And including backups, this is going to be about $490 per month. If you are looking for the Mumbai region estimate, I remember that was about 450. So I'll just pause here and get to see if there are any questions so far. No question?
There are a few on the chat window, Lily.
Yeah, they're a little technical, so I'm gonna go ahead and
Are
address
you
them.
looking into that? Yeah, okay. Just thought we'll at least inform Kwa and Mohammad Mirza. So yeah, thank you. We will look into that.
Yeah, no worries. So a lot of the things I'm seeing right now is about the hands-on lab. So please appreciate your patience. I think Anirudh is replying to each and every one of your troubleshoots. So if there are no questions about the pricing and the service itself, let me move on to the use cases. All right. So I think this is one of the highlights for the session to understand when can you actually apply FSX to your workload. So one of the very typical use cases is, again, department shares, user shares, home directories. And for this, we also see a very increasing demand of end-user computing. So again, you can access file shares from an on-prem environment or also in AWS. So you can use Direct Connect and site-to-site VPN. But what I want to highlight over here is that if you are using end-user computing, and this could be workspaces or AppStream 2.0, or it could be Citrix VDI on AWS, so on and so forth. If you are prioritizing low latency, so the sub-millisecond latency that you want, so that multiple end users can have seamless environment to access the file shared storage. And we see this from a lot of the enterprises as well as FSIs. Also, when it comes to media customers, you would probably want to prioritize the performance, right? So in this case, we see a lot of the customers modernizing their storage to FSX. Instead of having something that they have on third party or something that's given default by using these EUC options. Another thing that we see is application data. So if you have Windows-based applications that need a shared file storage, you can typically give it a go and review how you can modernize your storage. In terms of verticals, what we see is, for example, if it's real estate, you'll probably have a lot of documents around mortgage, FSI as well when it comes to like loaning, so on and so forth, as well as healthcare with the medical records. We also see around legal companies like documents that support attorneys. Those kind of document sharing system, it usually needs a secure and fully managed solution where a lot of the customers will seek Amazon FSx. Another case that we would see is, for example, grid computing in FSIs, or if customers want to do a risk analysis of their finance. All of those cases, multiple EC2 instances will have to access one shared file storage, and that's where FSx comes in. Now, the last use case, which is growing these days, is around SQL migration. So typically, if you have SQL Server and would like to move that to the cloud, you will have a couple different options. One is having a fully managed experience using Amazon RDS, Relational Database Service. The other option would be doing a simple lift and shift to Amazon EC2. Now, if you are currently using SQL Enterprise license and would like to switch that to SQL Standard due to cost reasons, or if you're using SQL Standard license right now and would like to have high availability, this is the option that you can go for. So previously, if you look into the left side, there was no native shared storage option on AWS if you wanted to have SQL Server on EC2 and have high availability. You needed to use a third-party solution. Now with FSx, that is not the case. So now you can have high availability for SQL Standard license with a lift and shift to EC2 and not having to go through a particular replatform. So let's see why customers would go for this option. So this is a TCO analysis versus of availability groups versus failover cluster instances with Amazon FSx. So in this case, you can see for availability groups, if you want to have the HA option, you need to use the SQL Enterprise license. If you want to switch that to SQL Standard while having the HA, you can use failover cluster instances with FSx, just like the diagram that you saw before. And with that, because you're switching the license to standard, there's a ton of cost optimization that you can do, which pretty much saves about half of the price. So in summary, if I were to look into the key use cases of FSx, one is if you have Windows-based applications, doesn't matter if it's for .NET or content management, or if it's simply using a bunch of EC2 Windows that needs to use a shared file storage. If you want to use SMB protocol with a fully managed experience, consider FSx as your option. Another aspect will be, again, home directories and user shares. And also end user computing. Again, this is a very rapidly growing demand that we're seeing from customers. And if you want to look into persistent storage that is readily available and accessible across multiple hundreds of users, you would probably want to have a safe and secure and accessible environment using FSx. This is another use case. I'm not sure if today we have any media customers, but if you are currently working on VFX rendering and video editing for post-processing, and you're using Adobe Premiere, that means that you are probably having a large size of Windows file storage, or you are working in a virtual workstation environment. And both cases would be suitable to modernize the storage to Amazon FSx. Data analytics, again, if you are having multiple compute instances accessing one particular file storage, which is typically the case for example, grid computing or financial analysis, so on and so forth. In those cases, again, you will probably want a secure file storage service. And lastly, we have Microsoft SQL. So if you want to have SQL standard license in high availability in the cloud, you can easily lift and shift with EC2 and FSX. So here are some of the case studies that we have been building. Info was one of our recent customers that moved their on-prem NAS to Amazon FSX, and that actually brought a 50% cost reduction, as well as the performance growing by 80%. Also, Doxilent is a pretty interesting case because it's a document management share software, and the implementation itself took less than a day. So with that cost reduction, the customers typically have more budget to spend into analytics and machine learning, or more of the interesting projects, as well as saving that overhead for admin. So both cases are pretty interesting to look into, not just the cost, performance, but also the scalability, as well as their IT budget being spent into something more meaningful to their business. I see some of the questions coming into the comment section, and I think some of them overlap with the FAQ. So I'll just go through some of the frequently asked questions we hear from customers, and then I'll open up to Q&A. So one thing that we hear a lot is that can you access FSX from on-prem environment? So in this case, yes, you can access Amazon FSX file systems, whether it's Windows or Lustre. You can access that from on-prem using AWS Direct Connect or VPN. So basically, as long as you see from the diagram that you have a way to access the AWS VPC, you will be able to access from on-prem. Can you access from your on-prem Active Directory? That's also a very common question we get. As you've seen from today's initial setup Anirudh showed, this time we're going with AWS Managed AD, but you can also attach your own corporate Active Directory, whether it's from on-prem or it's from EC2. How secure is the data stored on FSX? So here there are a couple different features that could back up. So one of the things is the local snapshots. And again, we have fully managed backups that will be automated on a daily basis. And also you can customize it. So for example, having backups every 15 minutes, that's also available as long as you customize. Also, it provides fully managed data encryption at transit and at rest and in transit. And also, when it comes to compliance, again, it's HIPAA compliant, PCI compliant, SOC, GDPR, so on and so forth. Last question, how do you actually migrate the file data into FSX? So for this, you can use something called AWS Data Sync, which is an online data transfer service. The other way that you can do is using Robocopy, because again, and this is a Windows feature, and basically things like DFS namespaces or Robocopy or shadow copy, so on and so forth, all of these are available on for Amazon FSX as well, because it is running on Windows Server. So I'll just pause here. I think I've spent about 30 minutes, so hopefully we have the AD setup up and running pretty soon. But are there any other questions that were from the comments that we'd like to follow up on? I think Mark has been sharing a lot of the replies and answers, but let's see if there's anything else. Yep. So, Joycey, when it comes to FSX, you will have to choose Active Directory. Um, we are gathering a lot of feedback. So you have the flexibility of using AD on-prem or on EC2 or using AWS Managed AD. Some of the feature requests we're getting is to have that flexibility of not having to use AD as well. So this is something that we are actually working on. And I'm not sure if there's going to be any announcement during reInvent, which is our customer event happening year end, and it shows about the roadmaps of the new services and features. But maybe you can count on that event, if not early half of next year. No worries. Any question about the workload that you might be having? So, for example, do you want to check if this will be a good storage option for your workload? If there is, please feel free to just put it on the chat that you want to have, you want to take something offline with Aspire Next. All right. If there are no more questions, I'll just pause the theory aspect here. Anirudh, how is your setup going, by the way? Just wanted to check.
Yeah, my directory is up.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna answer these two more questions from Mohammed Mirza and Ryan,
Sure.
and then I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again. So, okay, since I'm already talking, Mohammed Mirza, no, you cannot configure distributed file system replication on multi-AZ or single AZ2 file systems on FSX. Um, I think AWS is working on that part, and I think Lily will be able to keep us updated, and we definitely be able to help you if you have any complications around that. Right. So people who normally access their NAS using VPNs like Cisco and eConnect, once shifting to FSX, will they have to switch to AWS VPN? Yes, there will have to be a VPN connection to FSX if you do deploy your FSX file server in a private subnet, which I think from a security perspective is a recommendation for organizations. There are two VPN capabilities available. So one you can do is a site-to-site VPN for organizations still working from the office, or for organizations that work from home nowadays, you can always leverage Amazon's client VPN to connect to your FSX. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Has everyone else's directory service come online?
I see a yes from Kevin.
All right, that's good. Cool. So if that's the case, I think if we should move on. If it's still taking some time, just let me know in the chat, and I can always backtrack for you guys to show you what we're going to be doing. Right? Cool. So now, as you can see, my directory service is now active, right? So I have two DNS servers that are deployed within my private subnets, right? You can go ahead. You have various possibilities that you can do with your Active Directory on AWS, right? So, like I said, it's a Windows AD on AWS. There are a few constraints like trust forests and stuff, but most of the like trust relationships of single forests are one of those constraints. But most of those constraints are being worked on by AWS. So I'm going to go ahead and let's start deploying FSX, right? I'm going to go click on services on my top left-hand corner, and I'm just going to search for FSX. Now, when I click on FSX, it automatically opens the FSX dashboard, right? So as you can see, I currently have no FSX file systems running. So it's really simple. I'm going to go ahead and click on Create FSX file system. Like Lily said, you have two options. You have both Windows file system and FSX for Lustre, where the use cases are two very different use cases. Lustre is normally used for high performance computing because of the amount of IOPS needed for high performance computing workloads, right? So if that's the type of workload you're planning to use FSX for, I would definitely suggest Lustre, but let's concentrate on FSX for Windows file server for today. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. You see some of the features that are available for FSX file system. Click on next, and I'm going to give this a name. So it's going to be FSX demo. So I'm going to create this as a multi-AZ deployment like I showed you in my diagram. It's going to be a multi-AZ deployment with a preferred FSX, that's your primary FSX, and your failover to your standby FSX, right? This failover is automatic. So you don't have to do anything in case there is a failover on there's a failure on your FSX instance. The failure happens on the back end, and the failover is also automatic on Amazon FSX, right? So for now, you have two options when it comes to your storage type. You can either choose HDD or SSD. Just remember, if you're choosing as a HDD, 2000 GB is the minimum, and for SSD, it's a minimum of 32 GB. Right, so I'm going to go click on SSD. I'm going to provision 100 GB of SSD. So like Lily said, right? So Amazon automatically recommends the throughput capacity you need. So I like to think of IOPS versus throughput. Like IOPS is like a fast sports car, while throughput is like a huge truck. So your IOPS, you can take small loads in and out really fast, but throughput takes is basically how much load you can take at a single time, right? So you can go ahead and either choose your 16 Mbps recommended throughput, or you can specify throughput capacity, right? So I'm going to go ahead and choose 8 Mbps because this is going to be a demo. And then I'm going to deploy this into my FSX demo VPC. So you have two options, right? So you have your domain controller security group that was deployed um, by the AD directory services, and you have your default security group in your VPC. So you go ahead and select your default security group. You can always go ahead and edit this particular security group later on, and choose the subnets you're going to be deploying this in. So I'm deploying it again in private subnet 1 and private subnet 2, right? The ports required action for your AD to connect to these ports as per the diagram. It's public information available on the Amazon Docs page. So the basic SMB ports, right? So 445 for your SMB client and 5985 for administrative access, right? So someone asked a question on connecting using PowerShell, right? So the reason PowerShell wouldn't connect would possibly have been because you haven't opened port 5985 on your FSX Windows file system, because in order for FSX to allow an inbound PowerShell connection, it requires that port to be open. While as for outbound connection, FSX talks to your AD on a range of ports, and it talks to your DNS server on port 53. Any questions up till now? All right. I don't see any questions. Okay. Cool. Back to FSX. So I'm now going to choose my authentication method, right? So this is where you would choose your authentication, either being an Amazon managed AD or an AD on an EC2 instance. So you can either choose your self-managed AD or the Amazon managed Microsoft Active Directory. So since I have created my Amazon Microsoft directory, I am going to go ahead and choose my directory, right? This is the encryption keys. You can always go ahead and create your own keys. By default, AWS does provide you a key from KMS. KMS is FIPS compliant, so and uses an industry standard of AES 256 to encrypt its resources, right? So then you have your backup and maintenance windows, right? So your backup is automatically enabled. You can choose to disable this, but I would suggest to always keep it enabled. And you can choose your backup window. So I'm going to say that it doesn't matter when my backup's happening, because so when you choose a multi-AZ backup, right? When you use a multi-AZ file system, the backup doesn't actually happen on your primary FSX instance. It's actually happening on your secondary FSX standby instance. So that there's no effect on the resources in your primary instance. So that's how it works in the backend. But in a single AZ setup, you actually have maybe very slight dip during the backup. So you would might want to select when you want to keep your backup. So I'm going to go ahead and select no preference for this demo and automatic retention period. So I'll have 7 backups that I retain and my weekly maintenance window. So like Lily was saying, so Amazon manages the whole Windows file server on the back end, right? So Windows file server requires a lot of patching, a lot of updates on the back end and stuff, or maybe the SMB protocol update. So that happens during the weekly maintenance window. So you can choose to have your maintenance window for 30 minutes on a Sunday, or you can have no preference. Since it's a demo, I'm going to leave it as no preference. Tags. I always think it's important to tag your resources. So the name tags are normally automatically generated, right? So you can't use the file system name tag. So what I like, I always give it application owner tag, right? So that's going to be me. Most of the resources it helps you track and helps you give you better compliance and governance of your whole resource. Um, Go ahead and click on next. Verify your summary, right? So I'm creating a Windows file server. This is my name, multi-AZ SSD, 100 GB space, and 8 Mbps throughput. This is my VPC, my security group, my subnets, my Active Directory that I'm using the directory ID from when I created it, my key ARN, my backups, retention period, and maintenance windows, and along with my tags. So go ahead and click on Create File System. Now, while FSX is creating, this will also take about 10 minutes. We're going to go ahead and launch the EC2 instance required, right? So we've launched the FSX part. So we're done with the bottom portion. We're going to go ahead and launch this EC2 instance. So in the same console, you're just going to have to go to services and search for EC2. So search for EC2 is the first service that you see under compute. Just click on EC2 and you'd be sent to the EC2 dashboard. You can go ahead and click on instances on the left-hand side here or on instances here, and it takes you to the instance dashboard, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and launch an instance, right? I'm going to launch a Windows instance. So it can be Windows 2019, 2016, doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and select Windows 2019 base, and then select my instance type. So depending on your workload, so this is a simulation of what your on-premise systems would be, right? So I'm going to go with something that's closer to home. So I'm going to go maybe select T2 medium, or maybe an exact spec replication of my laptop would be this. Go ahead and select my VPC where I'm going to be deploying it. So choose my subnet. It's going to be my public subnet. I'm going to auto assign a public IP here. You can always assign a public IP later using elastic IPs. That's not an issue. Placement groups, you can choose a placement group by placement groups is basically where you would say that I have a few EC2 instances that talk to each other and require a low latency connection between them on the internal Amazon network. So what Amazon does is it places all your instances close to each other, right? Capacity reservation is going to be open, and I'm going to go ahead and join it to my Active Directory, right? Now, in order for you to join this Active Directory, you need an IAM role. So we're going to go ahead and click on IAM role. This is going to open in a new window. Does anyone have any questions as to what's happening? Right. Don't see any questions. I'm going to proceed. So we're going to go ahead and create a role for our EC2 instance, right? So you're going to say that the type of trust entity, so that's the type of resource you're creating, is going to be an AWS resource in my own account, right? The common use cases, I'm going to be choosing EC2. So basically, I'm going to let EC2 call various AWS resources on my behalf, and I'm going to add a set of permissions to this, right? So the two policies that are required uh, to actually have a domain join your EC2 join your domain is going to be the SSM manage co, right? But I'm going to give you guys this name so it's easier for you. Sorry about that. And the directory services. So directory service access lets your instance join the AD, while managed instance core uses systems manager to run particular commands on your EC2 instance to join the Active Directory, right? Go ahead and hit tags. I'm going to give this a name. Go ahead and review this. Sorry about that. Name, you can go ahead and change the description if you want. And you're going to go ahead and click on create role. And once you create role, you can see your role has been created. Just remember the name of your role. Close this, go back to your instance launch wizard and hit the refresh button. This will give you a list of roles that have been created. So this is the one I just now created. So the FSX demo AD role, right? So you have various other options like CPU options and stuff. For now, we're going to leave all of this untouched. If you do have a question about any of these options, feel free to drop me a message and I can go through them one by one. Right? I'm going to go ahead and add some storage. So by default, I have a minimum of 30 GB that's required by Windows operating systems to run. So I'm going to leave it at 30 GB and add my tags here. Right, so next is going to be my security groups. You can go ahead and create a new security group or select an existing security group. So you can either select your default VPC security group or your the security group to your AD. But I would suggest you create a new security group. So I'm going to say FSX demo security. Right, and my FSX demo security group is going to need me to RDP into it, right? So I'm going to open port 3389 to my IP address because it's going to be public. So I'm going to say Mark 4. That's going to be the IP address. And then go ahead and review your details, right? So you're launching a Windows 2019 server. What's the instance details? You're joining it to the expire.local network DNS name to the directory. Go ahead and click on launch. Oh, here you're going to have an option, right? So if you have existing key pairs, you can go ahead and choose an existing key pair. Or if you need to create a new key pair, you can create a new key pair. So for this demo, I'm going to go ahead and create a new key pair. And the key pair's name is going to be AWS FSX demo demo key pair. Right? So remember to always download the key pair because you only get to download this key pair once. AWS doesn't let you do it again after you've launched the instance. Right, so my EC2 instance is now launching. Let's go back and check on my FSX to see if it has been created. It looks like it is still creating. Let's give that some time while my EC2 instance also creates. If you guys want to go get some coffee, now would be a good time to go ahead and get some coffee. Right, so my EC2 instance isn't running. I'm just going to wait for my status checks to initialize so that I know my instance is running perfectly fine in the background also. All right. I think while FSX is deploying, I should take you through the FSX console, just so that everyone has an understanding of what is happening on the FSX console. So the FSX console is pretty straightforward, as you can see. So you have your file system ID to help you identify file systems, the state it is in. So right now it's creating, right? So when it's done, it'll say it's in a running state. My storage, my throughput that I've set, the type of storage I'm using, and my deployment type. Now, the other tabs available are your network and security tabs. So, right, you have your VPC that is deployed in. Once the FSX file system is running, you will get your DNS name and your so this is the preferred file server IP. So you can choose to create join on the DNS name or on the IP. You can connect to it on both. And if in case someone is connecting through PowerShell, you have a separate PowerShell endpoint that is used to connect to it, right? Then you have your preferred subnet. So this is where your VPC, your file system A is running, and your standby is running in file system B. Right. Then you have your monitoring. So this is part of the dashboard as shown in this diagram, right? So the dashboard over here. So with the monitor, you can go ahead and monitor your free storage capacity, your total throughput that you're using. So that's bytes per second, but you've set it in, remember you have set it in megabytes per second, right? And your total IOPS, so that's how many operations you're doing per second. So by analyzing the information from here, you can go ahead and decide whether you need to scale up your IOPS or your throughput, or maybe change the type of storage type you're using in the backend. You can also, by measuring your file's storage capacity, you can go ahead and automate the updates, right? So one of the updates that you can do is update your storage capacity or update your throughput capacity. So by monitoring your available storage on your CloudWatch dashboard using alarms, you can go ahead and automate the whole process so that users that are using FSX don't face this issue where they're running out of space. Then you have the administration part. So that's where you set your weekly maintenance windows. You can go ahead and change that setting from here. Your automated backups are available here. So you have your settings, and every time your backup is created, it will appear here. Or you can go ahead and create a manual backup. Or you can select a backup and you can restore from a backup in case of a failure or you need to retrieve any file. Any questions? Right. I don't see any questions. So I'm just going to wait for a couple more minutes till my file system comes online. In the meantime, why don't we go ahead and check on our EC2 instances? Has anyone faced an issue while creating the EC2 instance that requires any troubleshooting? Please do let me know. I'm going to go ahead and connect to our EC2 instance, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click on connect. I'm going to say I have an RDP client. I'm going to copy my password, IP. I'm going to open MSC. It doesn't connect. I don't think I'm sharing my RDP client, so I'm going to go ahead and share my full screen. Right, so you have two options now. So you can either connect through the local administrator that would be using this particular password, or you can go ahead and connect through the AD administrator, right? So we're going to go see if the instance has successfully joined the directory. So that is admin. So admin is the default user available in the directory service because administrator is already a local user on the system. Let's go ahead and put in the. You can use the NetBIOS name too. There's no issues with that, or you can use the email based approach. Go ahead and put in my password. Yes, it looks like my instance has successfully joined my directory, and it is now configuring my remote session into my directory. So it's taking me to the admin side of my directory service of my EC2 instance. park that to the side. So just launching my EC2 instance. Let's check on FSX. All right, looks like this is still creating. All right, looks like my instance has booted successfully. I'm going to go ahead and so let's go check out the properties of this particular instance. All right, so 16 GB, that's a 4-core processor. And as you can see, it is successfully joined to my domain. So as soon as FSX is available, I will show you how we can go ahead and configure FSX as a Windows file share and configure more shares on FSX using FSM, File System Manager on Windows. In the meantime, Bhavika, do you want to take everyone through the end of the slide deck?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. Anirudh, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, so if you can switch. Yes, thank you so much. So thank you everybody for being such a patient and involved attendees today. What we'd also like to leave for each one of you to consider is that how can we engage going forward from here. A couple of things we will do is, of course, we'll be sending to each of you the website recording as well as the slides for your reference. Having said that, you will also be receiving a detailed email on the promotional offers that we would like to launch for the people who have made time to come and attend this hands-on workshop. So please watch out for those details. The last thing is also that if any of you think that this has not been enough, you may need to actually discuss your specific setup within your organization. So if there's anything that has not been directly addressed, we'll be very happy to also continue these discussions with Anirudh, who's been on the call, Anirudh Mark. And we would like to then maybe have a customized session for you. And if you want to invite your colleagues who may also have a role to play in this discussion. So, yeah, these are some of the things we want to kind of highlight. Is there any other question or comment on, also feedback, right? I mean, was this helpful, etc.? Maybe we can take a couple of minutes to either hear from any of the participant. That would be very encouraging to get some feedback. If not, then please put it on the chat window. But do let us know whether this session was good and what more would you like to hear. Anything else, Mark, you'd like to add, or maybe Lily yourself?
Yeah, I'd just like to add a couple of comments on this. So Amazon FSX for Windows File Server has been in the Asia Pacific region for a while, if we count Singapore and Sydney, so on and so forth. But for Mumbai region, it's only been launched in June this year, and it's really picking up that customer demand. While there are only so many partners that really have that technical competency to drive customers' cloud adoption journey in a safe and accelerated manner. And I find this a very, very rare opportunity for you to have that free hands-on experience, as well as getting to know what the consulting offer Aspire Next offers. So please don't be shy if you want to get to know more about the service, as well as what exactly is a consulting and deployment offer Aspire Next brings to you. I believe there is only, again, that so many partners in this entire region who has this kind of capability, who can run and host a workshop fully led by themselves from the technical aspect. So with that, I would like to open up the next 30 minutes or so for any questions that you may have about the service or the workload that you have, or anything you would like to take offline with Aspire Next. Anirudh, do you have any comments before we wrap up?
I don't have any comments at the moment, but so my DNS name is populated, so I think it's just gonna be a few more minutes till the file system is online. So so if you take a look at why it's taking so long, is because what AWS is doing in the backend is deploying both your primary and your secondary file system. So it needs to create a distribution gives you the endpoint that you can map on your. So if anyone has any technical questions or any questions for Bhavika from a sales perspective, we would like to address them now, or you can just drop us a mail or at sales@hispanics.com too. Right. So I think now would be a good time for a break. I think everyone's been actually sitting for some time now. So if anyone wants to go get a coffee, I think we can take a 5 minute break, go ahead, get a coffee, and then come back. All right. Can everyone hear me? Am I audible?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, cool. So it's not yet online, but okay, yeah, it is now available. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen so everyone can see that. All right. So now as you can see, my FSX demo file system is now available, right? So what I have to do is go ahead and click on FSX demo, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and open my network interface settings. So this is something that you need to remember, because if you remember when we did select our security group, we selected the VPC default security group, right? So the thing with the VPC default security group is it does not have access to within the VPC. So what I've gone and done is I've gone and changed the source IP to my VPC block. So since it's a default security group for my entire VPC, it always has all traffic open. So I've gone and said that within my VPC itself, I can go ahead. I have no problems in letting my demo setup communicate to each other. But in case of a production workload, what you would ideally do is you would go ahead and restrict the traffic based on those ports that I showed you some time back, right? So you would go ahead and make individual entries for the ports, and you would go and say that only these particular IPs are allowed to connect to my particular file system. Right, so what I've gone and done is I've click on edit inbound rules. What you would normally see over here is um, you'd normally see the security group ID already populated. So you just go ahead and click on the cross button and type in your VPC CIDR block in this particular space and hit enter and click on save rules. So I have not changed any rules. I'm just going to click on cancel, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and enter my RDP session. As you can see, this is my RDP session. I hit run, and this is my DNS name to my FSX instance, right? So you can get DNS name from here. So you have two names. You have your DNS name. This is the name onto which clients would connect. And then you have your administrative name. This is the name onto which your remote PowerShell endpoint would normally connect. So the reason it's differentiated like this is because they both use different protocols in the backend. This uses the SMB protocol, while this uses your Windows PowerShell protocol to connect and administer the FSX Windows file server. All right, so the default share that is available within the file server is the /share. So you go ahead and put your double slash your DNS name and then you one more slash and share and go and click on OK. So it automatically authenticates since I am already logged in as an administrator, right? So I'm logged in as admin at spinex.local. That's the user I'm logged in as. It goes ahead and authenticates this as my as the user who's trying to access the share. So similarly, you can go ahead and map this as a network drive. So reconnect at sign in. I can choose to use different credentials. Like if you have various users, you maybe you're not logged in as admin, but you're an administrator working on it. You can connect to a different credential, or you can go ahead and connect to the same credential. So I'm going to go and paste that share on finish. And as you can see, I now have my share mapped over here. Now, what else you can do is like Lily said, right? At the backend, it is still Windows file server. So it still gives you the ability to connect to it on FSMGMT, right? So this is your local share. What you have to do is go ahead and say connect to another computer, and you put in the same DNS name, right? Just without the backspaces and the thing. So you go ahead and click on OK, and this automatically connects to your Amazon file share. So you're connected to your share folders. You have your shares. You can see open sessions, open files. So in case I do create a file over here, so I've created a file, right? So I go ahead and open the file. These type of files will show up over here, right? So it's open as write plus read at the moment. Then you have your session. So I have this particular session open on admin, right? So I have one session open over here, and I have another session open over here. So these sessions are open as admin, and you can see the users who are logged in. And in case you see a user that is not supposed to have access to a particular share, you can go ahead and go to shares. You can go ahead and go to share, go to its properties, like you would on a normal permission, and go ahead and add and remove permissions to your particular share. Or what you can also do is go ahead and add a new share if you want. So click on new share. Next. So what's your path going to be? So you don't have a path at the moment, so I'm going to say it's going to be under my D drive, right? So I'm going to click on D. You can have different shares if you want, and I'm going to name it images. Share name, description, etc. And finish and finish. Right? So images. Okay, wait a second. I think I just lost connectivity to Chimes. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, cool. Yeah, so that's the basics of Windows file share. I think with that, I'll be ending the demo. So I'm just going to take the last 10 minutes to help everyone destroy the environment they've created, because yeah, I don't want everyone running this demo environment. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect from. So if everyone is done with the demo too, um, please go ahead and just disconnect from your RDP session. And the first thing you would do is go ahead and terminate your instance, right? So unless anyone has any more questions that are required for me to address. All right, Ryan, do you have a question or? Okay, I think Ryan was just acknowledging that he's done with the workshop. Okay, cool. So we're going to go ahead and terminate our instance, right? So go to actions, click on your instance, go to actions, instance state, click on it, give you another menu, and click on terminate instance. And remember, once you've terminated the instance, you don't have access to this instance and it cannot be undone. So go ahead and click on terminate, and then the instance will successfully start terminating. What we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and delete FSX, right? So we're going to enter your file system. So you go to at the FSX console, you click on your name of the file system, and you go ahead and click on actions and delete file system. Right. So when you're deleting your file system, you have the option to create your final backup in case you want to restore from this at a later point of time. Or you can just go ahead and click on no, I don't want my backup, and I acknowledge that I will not be able to access it again. So in order for you to delete it, you do need to put in the file system ID as a confirmation. Let's put in the file system ID into the field and click on delete file system. All right. So my file system will be deleting now. So while that deletes, we're going to have to wait for it to delete before we can actually delete directory services. So open the directory services console, the same procedure, actions, and then delete directory. This might throw an error because we do have a few resources that are using this directory, but it should let us delete it because we have started the termination process for the other instances. All right, you can see that the file system is still using it, so there's an authorized application that's still using it. So we're going to have to wait for a few minutes for the file system to be deleted. Our EC test should have been terminated by now. As you can see, it's terminated. We're going to go ahead and wait for our FSX to also be deleted. And then it's as simple as deleting the directory service. Is anyone facing any other issues during this? All right. If anyone has any more questions about deleting the infrastructure, That's about it. So you go ahead and delete FSX and directory service, and then the same for the VPC that you've created. So if you click on VPC, as soon as you click on delete VPC, any associated resources to the VPC is also deleted. So that will be the route tables, the subnets that you've created are under it, and the internet gateway is automatically deleted as soon as you click on actions and delete your VPC. Right. So let me just summarize what we've done today, right? So we've gone ahead and we've created your AD VPC into availability zones. So the region we chose for AWS Cloud was North Virginia. We've created a VPC with a CIDR block of 10.0.0.0/16 and four subnets within that VPC that span two availability zones. So that was US East 1A and US East 1B as the AZs. Then what we did was we went ahead and created our directory service. So we used Windows managed AD from AWS. Uh, Alternatively, we could have also used self-host, self-managed Active Directory, either on EC2 instances or an existing Active Directory on premise, right? So what we did next was we went ahead and created AWS FSX, right? So let me just pull up the logo, right? So we created our primary FSX. And we also created a standby FSX instance. So there's an automatic replication that happens between the two. And then we went ahead and we created our EC2 instance. Right? From our EC2 instance, we connected using the internet gateway and mapped our EC2 instance to our primary FSX instance. So this was a summary of what we actually deployed today. Um, FSX has a lot more capabilities like through automatic throughput management, data duplication. So let's say one of the use cases of FSX is using it as user file shares, right? So user file shares normally don't have a lot of like new data. So normally the same data that's changed repeatedly, right? So by enabling FSX's data deduplication on FSX, you're actually able to save about a minimum of 30% of storage space for the use case being end user file shares, right? Because these documents are the same documents I'll just edit it. So just a small portion of that block that is changing. So that's one of the features of FSX that I think are really brilliant when it comes to the whole. If you look at the economics of it, right, having the same thing on premise requires you to actually have extra storage on hand for you to have deduplication happen because of the all RAID policy that applied during deduplication also. So this is just a short on this. I'm just going to check if this is done. This is going to take some time. So let's try deleting this. All right, so I think I'm going to leave you guys here. It's with these with standing instructions as to how to delete it. So if you followed me till Amazon FSX and this is deleting, as soon as this is deleted, you just have to go ahead and select your directory actions and delete directory. If you guys do have an issue with deleting your workspace, you can always reach out to me. I'm just going to drop my email ID in the chat window for anyone who needs it. Or if you guys have any questions that you would like to ask me or direct towards Spinext, you can also ask me those questions here. All right. Any other questions? If not, I think we should be done for the day. Lily, Bhavika, anything from your
Yep.
side?
Any other questions so far? No further comments from my side. We'll be sharing the recordings as well as the slides too, so that you will also get our contact information if you have any questions you want to move ahead further with the SPA next. All right, if there are no further questions, thank you so much, everyone, for joining again. Bhavika, do you have
Yeah.
any last comments you'd like to
No,
share?
I think just like you, want to thank everybody for taking time to go through this hands-on workshop. And Anirudh can be reached in case they have any queries. And of course, we'll be sending a personalized email to each one of the participants on how they can enroll on the services. So thank you, Lily, so much for taking time out. And thank you, Mark, as well for such a great session.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Bhavika. Thank you,
everybody.
Lily.
Have a good day
Nice
ahead.
having you.
Thank you.